For RCR Wireless News, I'm Sean Kinney, and it is the last day of Mobile World Congress. Everybody's clearing out. We thought that'd be an opportune time to go ahead and do a quick little recap with some of our analyst partners. So let me introduce Monica Paolini, Senza Fili consultant, and Susan Welsh Grimaldo, strategy analytics. So Monica, what were some of your highlights from the past 4 days?
Well, I think that the thing that stood out the most is like how many cars there are here. I mean, it's like a connected car, it's like a car Congress. So, but other than that, there's a lot of activity. That's great to see. My two areas of focus were analytics and 3.5, so that's where I can comment more. And one thing that is interesting is that now everybody's talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, as if it's something you plug in and everything works fine. No. So there's going to be a lot of work. It's very exciting because there's a lot of work that can be done, but it's nothing really new. You know, machine learning has been around for like decades. Artificial intelligence too. So I think that it's important that we're moving forward that way, but we also have to be careful about it's just not going to be an easy ride. There's a lot of work, but it's a lot of opportunities there as well.
Susan, what about you? What really struck you this week?
Well, I have to say I came away really inspired this year, and it's kind of funny because you read some of the press and they're saying, oh, you're so far future oriented, you're looking at all these, connecting cars and doing all these future things we're not going to be doing for quite a long time. But I found there was a lot of innovation and collaboration around not just within the mobile industry, but with other ecosystems and IoT to really invent that future we're heading towards and collaborate and not just create some technology, but really pull in the needs of the customer. So some customer centricity, both on consumer and enterprise side, which I really like seeing that. But I think there was also some really good progress near term on the ground things from a huge range of things. I mean, I had a few areas I focused on a bit more, one being 5G use cases, but a lot of that, and I think there was some good consensus, you do that now. You put the use case in place now, and then you build your business, you build your partnerships, you build the customers, you work with them to create a very DevOps focus, let's iterate and get this right and work together. And then you move forward towards 5G. And concrete things happening, from the RAN, the core, on some of the 5G steps, and positive evolution in 4G too. So that I found very inspirational. I also looked at customer engagement and digital transformation of operators, and some really good stuff happening there as well. So I think it's really, you see the service providers taking this, even, talking, one of my favorite things, talking to Alex Choi from SK Telecom, CTO, he was focused on the customer, and it was really good to see that. And he was talking about with 5G what he's going to do, and one of the things he really wanted to do was showcase something that was compelling to consumers. And he said it's going to be a new form factor because on a smartphone you're not going to surprise people. He said it's going to be, some autonomous vehicles. It'll be VR, AR. I mean, some of the early things for the consumer side that we'll get more excited about and help to explain to people why 5G is compelling. So I think that's exciting.
May I add something? I think that I'm glad you mentioned consensus.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at it sort of way back, it used to be like we had wars. We have technology wars, was one standard against another. And I think that now we're kind of past that. And it's really refreshing to see when people are trying to say, okay, this is an issue, or like it's the QoE. The user experience. How do we address it? How do we address it as an industry? So there is much more of a focus on working together, and so it's like 5G is 5G for everybody, but everybody will take whatever they need out of it. And it's so much sort of fresh, and it's so much better to work in an environment where people are collaborating rather than fighting each other on, GSM or CDMA, that kind of
Yeah, I think that was really sort of exemplified for me in some of my discussions around open source. This is just, a really great way to go quickly, fast, if you have broad industry support and a lot of eyes on the same problem. I think at the same time you might run a little risk of fragmentation, but then again, when I was speaking with Amdocs earlier, they were very excited about the fact that OpenO and that eComp were sort of coming together under that new umbrella. And even you mentioned, real world progress. We're seeing an eComp deployment for consumer premise equipment with Orange Polska there. So that's just really interesting. And Mona, I also...
Yes, and I think that sort of brings the issue that it's a continuous evolution. So it's more than release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like we realize that we are living in a world that's in real time, and we cannot wait for the next release necessarily. We need to be able to hit the ground running if we find that.
You also mentioned 3.5. A lot of talk there. So what kind of struck you? What did you hear from some of your contacts?
Well, yeah, it was interesting because in the U.S. we see it as sharing spectrum among different tenants. So it's a great opportunity, but it's also really experimental way of using spectrum. So it's great news regardless of. It's more than 3.5, and it's more than the US in the long term. In Europe, there seemed to be more of a view like CBRS is more of a US thing, and I think that we really need to think about CBRS as a new way to use the spectrum, where there's not only one tenant. And the model of just an exclusive license is something that is still valuable, but we want to move beyond that to have a better spectrum optimization usage, which is 5G, right?
Yeah.
And Susan, you mentioned VR. For me, this was the first Mobile World Congress where the hype was gone, and I could really appreciate how VR is going to have a really big impact in the enterprise and in the consumer space.
Yeah, I think it will have a big impact. I think AR will probably have an even bigger impact in terms of you're in your world you're in, but you have other things feeding into it. So pulling information in to really digitalize your real world experience as you're in the real world. And I think that's going to have some real impact for the mobility part, because the VR you might be more likely to be somewhat stationary. You're not necessarily going to be wandering around, although we did see InterDigital had their personalized VR. I don't know if you saw that, but it could put in little personalized feeds in a multipath way that the different users in different locations would get localized data kind of popping up in their field of vision while they're in their VR experience. So there will be interesting things. I think we'll see a lot more innovation. There's still obviously a lot of work to be done on like the displays and things. You get it this close to your face. There's pixelation. I do think maybe on 5G, the smartphone, I mean, maybe VR for the smartphone is the key, because you will put it here, so you'll need to have that VR capacity and the throughput capacity and speeds for that good user experience for 5G. But I do think bringing in industry and innovating. I went to Huawei had their X Labs where they're doing consortium partnerships with industry. They had a lot of different other players there. Vodafone, China Mobile were there, others. So I think that's where we're seeing some of the collaboration. Network slicing, I don't know how much you saw in network slicing, but that to me is extremely exciting. And it is exciting, I heard many people talk about 5G is not just the radio. And there's a story we've been hearing from multiple people. Intel obviously doing a lot around that as well with some of the mobile edge computing or multi-access type edge computing as you pull in other systems. But really doing that quality of service and that ability for the operators to now have a new system designed from the ground up to deliver on the needs of the next generation industry as the industry moves forward and grapples with its own challenges of how to really use technology. So that's going to be extremely exciting. I love the federated network slicing demo that they had between Deutsche Telekom and SK Telecom, I think it was, that had that on the stand, and they could see how you can have, it was robotics in this case for remote control, but that ability to really create that quality of service cross global boundaries between countries and have that more of a global opportunity for industries and enterprise. So automotive, as you said, was big here. It'll be big for that industry as well. I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how that plays out, but it opens up new possibilities.
And Monica, you had mentioned unlicensed there. This is something that you and I have discussed before. What's your take on Multifire? They've come a long way with their 1.0 specification that's going to be circulated, I believe, next month among the broad industry, and they're already at work on 1.1 to better serve IoT. So what's the progress?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of progress. It's interesting. So I think that we're going to see more and more of the use cases for unlicensed spectrum, be Multifire, LTE unlicensed, or just Wi-Fi. There's a lot of innovation in Wi-Fi too. And I think that the IoT, it's really becoming more and more interesting because we think of it as from the public network, but I've heard a lot of talk about unlicensed and private networks, which can be LTE based or Wi-Fi based, because of a lot of applications are really local. So local breakout edge computing become very important. So we don't no longer have the idea that the mobile network is just a a nationwide coverage, which is obviously still valuable, but there is the other dimension that it's growing, which is the local network, the private network, which the enterprise is probably going to own / control or take a more active role. So what I think we're going to see over the next years is the enterprise taking a larger and larger role in determining what is it they need, what is it they want to do. Instead of asking the operator, what is it you can do for us, they will tell the operator or do it themselves. This is what we need to do, because there are so many IoT applications that are local that are, I think that's a huge market there and a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask you both a question that I ask almost everyone that I met with, and I don't know that I got a satisfactory answer all week. It's a broad question, but let's take the example of autonomous trucking, once that's a reality on a global scale. In the United States, that could maybe displace 5-8 million members of the workforce. Is there an economic responsibility, socioeconomic duty to lead that discussion if you're the person that's enabling such a massive shift?
Right. Actually, it's a very interesting question. The reason I say that is because one of the cab drivers coming over, we got into a conversation, and he said, well, what do you see at the show? And I said, well, there's all these autonomous vehicles. He's like, wait a minute, what does that mean for my job? So there are people thinking about this, and you hear everyone saying with all the talk about the AI, and I think that was in one of the keynotes with SoftBank, how many jobs can be displaced. But I've also heard about job creation opportunities. I also heard a lot about even just within the telcos retooling their own skill sets. A lot of the skills people have to do today with all the transition on the network to software-defined networking and NFV and things like that happening, a lot of those tools and skills that will be legacy and they'll need to be had, but people are going to lose jobs, and will they have the right skills for the new jobs that are available? So I think there is good job creation, but it may not match up. But I do think there's some exciting opportunities there in terms of, if people can have the right mindset about it, are there opportunities to do micro-learning, to use VR, AR, for example, handsets, to really play a role in micro-education courses and certifications and things like that, to really help bring people into this new digital lifestyle environment and all that implies in terms of society and the shifting in society. So we're in a global world. Jobs shift from country to another country. They shifted from, the industrial into more the
knowledge-based.
Yeah, I was going to say, exactly. And we're going through another transition. We're heading there. We see the digital native youth today, and there's still some digital divide there in many countries. So I was really glad at Women for Tech this morning, one of the companies that won there, they were doing a lot in Kenya to help educate children and help them think about technology. So we're seeing a lot of activity, I think, at particularly younger ages working on this. I think there is a responsibility to work with other ages and say, particularly in countries that have more of an aging workforce, how do we help bring these people into satisfying jobs and lives if they're changing what they've done their whole life? It won't happen overnight. I don't think we see a lot of these jobs go away real quickly. So I think we have time to prepare, but I think it's time to start really thinking through, as citizens, as governments, as associations like GSMA, what role do we all play? And that's where it's also nice to see the sustainability goals set up, showcased on many of the stages, and all the effort to engage people in that, to try to improve things.
So this is an excellent question again, and so I think you can resist change, but that doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. So you need to embrace change. As Susan would say, you need to see what's the best that you can do out of it. But we also have to remember this is nothing new, because there has been in the past a lot of cases where there have been innovation and displaced workers and change. So for instance, if you look at the textile industry, which there was exactly the same fears. You put the machine. What's going to happen to the people working? Well, what happened actually is that the number of people working in that industry grew, because what was happening before is that people would buy very few garments because they were so expensive you couldn't afford them. And then all of a sudden the price went down and people started buying much more clothes or whatever they were buying. So actually the market expanded and the number of people working in it increased. Clearly it's a different type of job. But if you really look at how many cab drivers we're going to have today and 20 years from now, that's really the wrong way to look at the question. We need to just look at the big picture and understand what is it as a society, as I say, we need to do to adapt to that change. but not resist it.
I'll make one other comment, because since you brought up a vehicle as the example, the whole vehicle industry is shifting. Their whole business model is shifting as well. So and mobile enables that, and if we see them adapting now. I mean, you go to like Ford's stand, they didn't have a car in the one I met. All the other people had cars, but one of the car manufacturers did not have a car that they were showcasing. And I think what it talks to is you're getting into a shared economy. They're thinking about, in a smart city environment, somebody might not own a vehicle. They may continue to own that. I even heard that about washing machines. It may not be an ownership model. It's a pay per use, and you're leasing it from me, and you're buying a service. So it's service enablement, cloud-based service enablement. That's where I think mobile interacting with all these different industries, they're shifting. Their business models are shifting. They need to adapt. We need to adapt. As humans, we need to help each other adapt, and I think that's going to be an exciting challenge. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. But it isn't just, do the jobs go away? The whole business model is shifting.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the automakers do seem to be taking it into consideration already, but that is a long progression. But it will end up maybe with mobility as a service. And I think the macro view on that is that's the whole point of the IoT, right? Asset utilization, asset efficiency.
Absolutely, and in all this, like connectivity is just going to be the fabric that unites it all, and that's new. So it's good, and it's good news for the industry, because when you look at monetization and all that, it's the thought of monetization as squeezing more dollars or euros or whatever from a subscriber, that's not really where the opportunity is. But it's really to think about how ubiquitous connectivity to humans and things is going to take us, and that's where I think it's very important to think about how efficient we are in using the resources, the hardware resources that we have out there, the spectrum resources, which is why I think that, like all the CBRS stuff, it's important, because right now the way we use spectrum is massively inefficient, because everybody's using it, it's allocated to a specific use, and it's a very old-fashioned way to think about spectrum. Spectrum should be used when it's needed and should be dynamic. So the whole industry is becoming dynamic, and I think the regulatory aspects of it in terms of the spectrum allocation should follow suit. And that's going to be very important to enable it. And
yeah, I would add, I think that dynamic nature and helping to have governments and regulators try to be as dynamic as the industry needs to be to keep up with itself and the changes, and I think that's a very key part. I'd add another thing that's interesting, and this adds to the changing role of the telco as well as the vendors into the telco ecosystem, the role of the analytics and the data sets. And we talked a little bit about artificial intelligence being big here, and cognitive learning and machine learning and all the different flavors, whether it's from the chatbot enabled, talk to Alexa to fix your problem with your cell phone bill or your Wi-Fi in your home. I think it was a number of demos of that. I won't call anyone out on that. There's a number of things that I saw demoed in terms of how that's coming, how we interact with our machines and our devices. But into the network, the ability, Telefonica Ara, for example, how they were doing the fourth platform and pulling in information from the user, giving the user transparency and control of their data sets, but at the same time leveraging that for broader industry and other uses, some of which are probably still going to be invented. I mean, that's the same thing with 5G. Uses are going to be invented. We need to be dynamic, agile, flexible, set up platforms that can deliver for innovation. But the other thing, just on the machine learning type stuff and the cognitive, I think that's really exciting also into the network, into the network core, even into the RAN, and the ability to start to do some preventative maintenance, some automation particularly, trying to learn and predict what's going to happen and actually do a better job of kind of self-healing and doing sort of zero touch in some of these environments, as well as for the offers made to the end user, so it becomes more personalized. So for example, I was talking to Comtel today, there's some really great stuff they were doing, pulling into the user journey and the customer journey, some of that rich data sets, not in a creepy way to the end user, but in a way that really could be beneficial and help to make you feel that you want to be loyal. Somebody cares about you. They're offering you things. So there's a couple of Matrix as well. I talked to about that Matrix software, and there's a lot of stuff happening, and it'll be fun to see in a couple years some of this getting more into the hand of the end user and becoming as common that we don't think about it as we do today, just with picking up your smartphone and using it for all sorts of things.
May I add something here? Yeah. And I think that when you say it's really important, and there is the focus on user, yes, crucial. But I think that as we do that, we need to start thinking about privacy. And that's going to be, as an industry, we need to tackle it, and we need to tackle it, I guess, in a different way, because there is a question now, what is that the operators or whoever knows about me? And I think that we need to, as a society, it's not a mobile operator issue, it's a society issue. We need to understand, in a world where everything is connected, what does privacy mean? What kind of ownership of the data, our image, our everything, is there? And I think that's again, it's important that it's not a telecom thing, it's a cultural thing, it's a society thing, and I think it's something that we need to deal with.
Yeah, when I think about privacy, I think about privacy, security, and trust as all part of the same transaction. But that's a different discussion for a different day, I think. But to sum it up, what we're really talking about here is convergence, but we're talking about network convergence, we're talking about converging humans with machines, we're talking about converging spectrum. And so maybe the next conversation around convergence need to be, how can we converge as an industry and as a government to move forward together? So I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us, Monica and Susan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll see everyone next year, we hope. Yeah, thanks.